Hey, I'm Scrimshire and we're going to do another production walkthrough. Today we're going to look at Flames, which is a track that's just come out. It's the last single before my album Paroxysm comes out. And actually, because there are some things in common with the production process on this, I thought we would look a bit more at the whole kind of Paroxysm album. So you'll hear a couple of tracks that haven't been released yet off the record, and I think maybe even something that's not even made it on, so something completely like exclusive may never get released. It's one of those ones. So there's quite a lot going on in this one, but at its very core it started with a drum beat, and that's why we will look across the whole album, because the drums are quite central to how this record kind of came into existence. Okay, so as ever, if you've watched the previous two production walkthroughs on this album, you'll know that I'm basically constructing almost everything in addictive drums. So I've got boutique mallets here, super dry, super dry. A lot of my production is really dry. So this is the core beat. This was actually the second idea on the whole album. And in fact, it nearly went in a completely different direction. Over here, this is something that I threw away. The very first idea after I wrote the drums, this was the first thing we did. So it was almost that. I'm really glad it's not that interesting, I don't think. So the point I wanted to make with this track in particular is that the drums are really central to it. So we're going to take a little detour here. These addictive drums are processed down here through a bunch of different things. The first thing is some vintage style compression. The second thing is that they're slammed, absolutely slammed through this tape emulation. And you can see I did have a chain of effects here, which I've kind of pulled out, and I was using this one chain of effects across all of the tracks essentially. So let's go and have a look. If I actually go back and open up some of these older projects, the original of this sits in this one folder. Basically, I was planning to do a project with Emanative as well. So it's Scrimshire, Emanative. Then I elongated when I realised I was doing it on my own to Scream, and that kind of like gave me the sense of what this project was feeling like. So there was the Scream 1 project, which was just me messing around on like a Juno and with some sampled like jazz drums, because I knew I wanted to do something that was more in the jazz space. I wanted to reach into that part of my influences. And then I created the Scream 2 project. And then within here, I created track 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 in 2 days. And I mean, not like the full existence of them and what they are now, of course, but the drum patterns, kind of like harmonic ideas that I wanted to do with them, improvising some keys ideas down or whatever, that happened in just 2 days. And that's why I think there's this cohesive sense of the album really pulling together, particularly from a drum production sense. Just a lucky couple of days, I guess. So we had Scream 2, which later became Scream 10, which later became Flames. After that, we had this track, Scream 3. And Scream 3 is super basic. And again, you see I've got this track over here called Drum Destruction, and that's 2 sets of addictive drums yet again. We start to see some of the ideas really emerging. So there's compression there, actual distortion pedal on this one. I ran it into this Capital Chambers reverb to give it a little bit of space, and then again after that into the Studer to really slam it, and had this. I was super pissed off, and these 2 days were this outpouring of anger and kind of, oh my God, just this anger and sort of like pain and everything. And I just wanted to hit things hard and make noises. And that's kind of set the precedent for how this album would evolve. So in here, you've got some noisy Moog. just making tones and nastiness. And later on I added some stuff to that, including working with the Repeat Beat Poet to do something that would encapsulate the principles of the album into one piece, which is called What is the State of Our State? Then I worked on a track called Scream 4, which became the opening track for the album, which is now called Permeate. If we come up to the drum destruction, you can see that this chain is really starting to emerge now. I've got some reverb at the start to create space, the Capital Chambers reverb in there as well, into the Studer, which is slammed. Then I'm using this filtering and EQ to try and give it a little bit of movement as well on top of what it's already doing, and narrowing the field down the stereo width, in this case using this BX Digital. And we'll give you a little peek of this. This is Permeate. Again with this, just some noisiness in terms of the bass and some weird sounds that are in there that are operating just to create discomfort and awkwardness. And I really envisaged using acoustic bass a lot more on this album, and it is used in some places, but there's obviously sound limitations without actually working with someone on that, and I was really trying to just get this process through, make this record really quickly. You know, it was 2 days that I was really trying to pull a lot of it together in. So this one still remains as Scream 5, and it is one that didn't make it onto the record. I enjoy it as a piece of music, but it's just, I'm not sure it plays to my strengths really. That's fine, it's great to create like that, it's great to create with an open mind. And then think about the curatorial process of bringing an album together further down the line. Sometimes you leave stuff behind and that's okay. You know, it's all your learning experience, and who knows when that might come into use at some point further down the line. There's definitely things that I've got that I've used 3, 4, 5 years later. So let's have a quick listen to this though. So again, we've got the addictive drums, and the processing evolved a little bit here, but still the same. We've got the Capital Chambers reverb into the Studer, the filter minis come back again there, the BX3 in there. I wanted more noise out of this one, more sound, more level, so this Oxford inflator, some clipping, and then some limiting, and finally some really narrowing of the sound with EQ. Using some contact upright bass here. Yeah, I like that chorus, but you know, it's alright. Maybe it'll live another day in something else. Then there was one more, Scream 6, and actually I think I felt like I needed to break out from the mould a little bit with this one. So I took a multi-track drum sample and cut it up, used it to my own purposes here, as you can see. And later on with this track I did do a lot more work in terms of pushing the drum sound to bring it a bit more in line with everything. But this became the track Your Invasion is a Lie, and has Idris Rahman on it, which I'll show you in a separate project later on. So yeah, that is the kind of starting place for how this whole album came together in essentially 2 days worth of work, where I was sitting, I kind of had a drum chain that I knew that I wanted to work with in terms of the processing, and that would create a sound that would be the basis for how this record would make sense and hold together. And it was really important for me to set parameters. Creating a consistent sound is something I've been really striving towards. You know, with my second and third albums in particular, I really felt like I was failing to find a common denominator in my sound. I think maybe being a DJ and that pull between the sort of music I would play in clubs and what I would want to write naturally if I was sat with a guitar was always kind of at play. This has always been a journey from listeners, which was still quite diverse. With this, I really actually went as far as trying to create a toolkit that would define specifically how this record would feel and sound. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this as a part 2, because that's a lot, right? You've just listened to me for a little while, you've probably had enough for now. But we'll come back to this one, to Flames, and talk about the creation from this drum sound to this point and where we moved on from there. Paroxysm is on pre-order now, and you can pick it up in a bunch of shops including Juno, my Bandcamp obviously, Phonica. So yeah, go and ask your local record shop for your copy.